All right, Shabbat Shalom, and we are going to be looking at the calendar from a perspective of the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I just want to share a book with you, Dead Sea Scrolls, by Michael Wise, Martin Abegg Jr., and Edward Cook. This is the perspective we're going from, along with the books of Jubilees and the book of Enoch. So Shabbat Shalom to everyone. I decided to go ahead and do this video on Shabbat just to elaborate a little bit on the calendar, because a lot of people have no clue where we are, and I lost track of where we are. In fact, the most recent day of remembrance, which was the sun going into the summer gate, which was the second day of remembrance, and that was June 15th. And I missed that. I missed the celebration of that for the Facebook group that I lead in the ways of Sabbath and the Torah ways. So Shabbat Shalom to everyone, and ironically there are people looking for the new moon sliver today. I used to do the calendar that way. It was a very basic way that made a lot of sense, and I decided to change the way I considered the calendar because there was too much evidence of what we're about to go over. So we're going to go over what is the Rosh Chodesh, which is always translated as the new moon in the modern English Bibles, and that is what Judaism actually does to this day, is they go by the moon, the phases of the moon, each phase representing a day of a biblical month. The problem is that causes there to sometimes be 13 months every year, and there is nowhere in Scripture that talks about the 13th month. It always talks about 12 months and 30 days for the months, 30 days exactly, and that's one of the issues, is the moon only has 29 and a half days in its precession, in its, in each phase averages out to 29 and a half days, and it ends up being 354 days for the whole year. The moon cycle, we'll call it. Whereas in the book of Enoch, the solar cycle is 364 days, which we're going to go over. The book of Enoch and the book of Jubilees both confirm a 364-day year, and we are going to have 4 divisions. So let's start out with the 4 divisions, or 4 seasons of the year. And by the way, I'm wearing a shirt that really helped me to get into this topic and really start looking what's above my head, is biblical cosmology, which aka flat Earth. So yes, let's go ahead and look at the 4 divisions, which is going to give us 13 weeks in each season. And of course, we know the biblical year will start in springtime. And this is the calendar I'm following. So basically, you have 12 months, and all 12 months of the year are mentioned in the regular canon of Scripture, but you will never hear about the 13th month in Scripture. It doesn't exist. So that's one of the first issues about making the moon phases to be the month. And not only that, but the year then becomes 354 days per year. And then you would add an extra phase, and you would have, I guess you would have 384 days on the off years, where you have to add an extra month. But you would never have a 364-day calendar. Well, I do believe this to be the restoration of the calendar for the end times, because as we know, the story goes that they began finding these scrolls in caves out in the Dead Sea area, and they called them the Dead Sea Scrolls, and they dated them to 2,000 years old approximately. And various different caves, various different scrolls, but they began finding these around the time that Israel once again was founded as a nation in 1947, 1948 time period. And they are only now being, translated in widely and put on the internet so that everybody can actually look at this stuff. So here we're in the summer, and I skipped over what we call the Intercalary Day, a seasonal day, and it's just an extra day, and we're going to read that in the book of Enoch in just a minute. But this is just an extra day that doesn't count as part of any of the months, actually. So the 30 times 12 is your 360 plus 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 days gives you an equal 364 days. Gives you 13 weeks in each season. 13 plus 13 is 26 weeks, and then another 13 and 13 gives you another 26. 26 plus 26 is 52 perfect weeks, and it is divisible by 7. Take 364, gives you perfect 7-day weeks. And this calendar should not upset the regular weekly cycle of 7 days, and that's what I'm going to go over here in just a minute. But actually, before I get too far into this, I want to take you to my YouTube channel, and that's right here. If you actually go to my homepage and you look at my playlists, and you can click Torah Observance here, and you're going to find some various different Torah videos, but you're going to find the three main just a little tidbit here. I don't necessarily agree with everything that's in my playlist. I might have just thought it was interesting. But anyway, you're going to find the main 3 channels I have been following about the calendar. And here is one of them, Jerry Morris. You're going to see Zadok Calendar Part 1, Zadok Calendar Part 2. And he actually mirrors those videos, and the maker of those videos was actually, I don't have her in here, but she is a young lady who analyzes the calendar, and this is her channel, Asherette Dead Sea Scrolls, 790 subscribers. This is the best information as far as these 3 channels that I've been able to find about the calendar. However, there are many people who are coming to observe this Zadok calendar, and you'll see Part 1, Part 2, there's a Part 3, there's a Part 4, and there's a Part 5. And just Parts 1 and 2 are very good and enlightening for the basics. Now I am not sure as to, I think her and the late Jerry Morris, because Jerry Morris now, he's another one. I watched every single one of his videos, and I watched every single one of this woman's videos, and I don't know that they were in perfect agreement as far as what day is what, but they agreed as the structure of the calendar. They were in agreement, and they were looking at the Dead Sea Scrolls and what was being kept track of in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And of course, they were keeping track of the priestly course, the 24 priestly courses. And interestingly enough, if you go back in time, you will see that the names of the priestly course that was in its duty, according to the calendar, would have prophetic meaning for the various events that happened in Scripture. And that's consistent. So there's prophetic meaning there. And of course, we know that the priestly service, which was when they would do their temple services, it was according to the calendar. So they would have had to have had some kind of recording of how this operated. And that's what we find in the Dead Sea Scrolls, is that they were recording this. They were recording they were keeping track of the full moon and the new moon sliver. However, they did not begin a month at the new moon sliver. They just simply kept track of where it would fall, because it does give a consistent pattern on the calendar. So we have Jerry Morris, and we have this woman, I forget her name, but it is a woman, very good teaching videos. And then let's see, what was that one? Part 1. Yeah, the third channel is John Minton, and John Minton has really the best videos. So he has an 8-part series, and he basically puts it up on the whiteboard, dry erase board, and he gives you something to look at that really makes it to where you can start understanding what's going on. So I am following John Minton's calendar, and that is what this calendar is. And John and Donna Minton, they sent me, their calendar. And so I just wanted to show where we are at, because I did miss the Day of Remembrance celebration, which I would have gone live, but it completely slipped my mind. There it is. That's June 15th, 2021, the second Day of Remembrance. The sun is in the 6th gate, Intercalary Day number 2. And so basically, this is basically celebrating the summer solstice, and basically the seasons go as, this would be celebrating the longest day of the year, would be the summer solstice, where you have your longest day of the year. The year starting at month 1 starts when you have the equal night and equal day. A lot of things I have in common with John Minton that I really appreciate. Number one, he does teach the death, burial, and resurrection the same way that I do, and he has him resurrecting just before the sun comes up on the morning of the Sabbath, and he has him going into the grave Tuesday evening, which would be Passover evening. Actually, they didn't get him fully buried until just before the sun came up Wednesday morning, when the Sabbath was about to begin. And yes, and that brings up the point that he starts the day at sunrise. And just by the way, if you're wanting to understand about starting the day at sunrise, that is in my Torah playlist. When does a day start? Here it is. morning or evening, part 1. And I think that is a 4-part of straight scripture. And that, if you really want to, because again, this is another tradition of Judaism that really has most people beginning their Sabbath Friday evening, whereas I begin mine Saturday morning at sunrise. But this here would be the video to look at for that. But so John Minton does do those things. He teaches those things the same, and of course he teaches it from a flat earth perspective, biblical cosmology with the dome and the flat earth, and he explains it that way, and really I believe that is the only way to really understand the circuits of the heavens and the gates spoken of in Enoch. I think you have to understand there is a molten looking glass dome above our heads. So yes, month 4, this is where we are now. We are down here on this Shabbat right here, July the 10th, the last Sabbath day of month 4. That's where we are. And the next celebration will come down, actually next Sunday will be the first of the first fruits of new wine. So, they would have had, and this is in Torah, they had the first fruits that they would always give back to Yah, the first fruits of their grain, or corn in the King James, the Old English, corn, oil, and wine. And those would have been 3 of their major harvests, so it would not be surprising that they would have some kind of celebration that is not mentioned as the feast days in Leviticus 23. And I don't really put it on the same level as the Moedim mentioned in Leviticus 23. However, I do believe they had this celebration, but their 3 main harvests would have been the grain, where, of course, that was a twofold feast, the feast of Shavuot, because they would harvest the barley around the time of the new year, and the first month, the month of Aviv, the month of green ears, and then they would harvest the wheat down when you get down to Shavuot, down in the 3rd month at Pentecost, which we went through that, and they would have unleavened bread, of course, would be the month, and the first month celebration, and then Shavuot is again a first fruits grain harvest time. Well, what would have been 2 other major ones? Of course, the fruit of the vine, the grapes, the grape harvest, and the new wine, and then of course the olives, the olive oil, the new oil, feast of new oil. So just touching on that a little bit. Oh yeah, I did pull up Deuteronomy 18:4. I know it's mentioned more than this, but that says, you are to give them the first fruits of your grain, new wine, oil, and the first fruits of the wool of your flock. And so I just wanted to point that out, that interestingly, their tithing and what they would give to the Levitical priests of their tithe and give it back to Yah would actually not typically be money. It would be of their substances that they would harvest and from their flock, and those things, actually material things, not money. So just kind of interesting that the church today is all about the tithe, but it's all about getting your money. But that's not how it was in the Torah. It was not all about tithing money. It was about tithing the first fruits of your harvest goods. And I'm sure that they did it for anything they harvested, whether it was, the tomatoes off the vine, or apple trees or whatever it would have been. So from there, where we would basically go, this is just an example in John Minton's video of how he divides up the seasons, and he lays out all the details for us. So yeah, that's where we are. June 15th, we said, was the summer gate, second intercalary day, and we're in the 25th day of the 4th month. We're coming up, we'll be getting to these fall feasts sooner than we know it. It moves along quickly, and the feasts are wonderful to celebrate. But real quickly, I did want to read from the scripture. I was going to try and have this pulled up on the screen, but I don't do this enough. I couldn't figure it out. So here is where the Rosh Chodesh probably comes from. This is what I believe. And it is not the new moon sliver, but it is this. And in the Et Sefer, he actually does make it the new moon, which becomes confusing because, it just does. But I'm going to replace new moon with Rosh Chodesh. And this is Jubilee 6, verse 23. And on the new moon of the first month, or actually on the Rosh Chodesh of the first month, and on the Rosh Chodesh of the 4th month, and on the Rosh Chodesh of the 7th month, and on the Rosh Chodesh of the 10th month, are the days of remembrance, and the days of the seasons in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever, and Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever. So Jubilees does call them feasts forever. Why it's not mentioned in Leviticus 23, I don't know for certain. So that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And the Rosh Chodesh of the first month he was bidden to make for himself an ark. And on the day the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. So these Rosh Chodeshes, these intercalary seasonal days, are going to be markers in Noah's story of the process of the flood and really beginning a new process. Let's see, verse 26. And on the Rosh Chodesh of the 4th month, the mouths of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the Rosh Chodesh of the 7th month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the Rosh Chodesh of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. And on this account he ordained them for himself as feasts for a memorial forever, and thus are they ordained. And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Each had 13 weeks, from one to another past their memorial, from the first to the second, from the second to the third, and from the third to the 4th. And all the days of the commandment will be 52 weeks of days, or 52 weeks, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets, and there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. And the command you and the children of Yasharel that observe the years according to this reckoning 364 days, and these will constitute a complete year, and they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts, for everything will fall out in them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day or disturb any feasts. So that's all I need to read there. I hate that I was going to stop and say something, and I don't remember what it was at the moment, but hopefully it'll come back into my mind. So basically, it's 364 days. Jubilees is one witness, and then Enoch is the second witness. And we will get to Enoch here. And basically, okay, trying to explain the Zadok calendar here, that there are a number of different people who are observing this structure of the calendar. TorahIsLight.org, I believe it is, or .com, but they actually go over these various different versions of the Zadok calendar, because there are different versions of the Zadok calendar that are based on the same structure, and TorahIsLight.org is actually going. The only thing different is that they are 1 week after when they began their 364 days, 1 week after this one of John Minton. And the reasoning for that is because they believe there's a verse in Enoch that suggests that you can't start the year before the equinox, before the spring equinox. However, that is not the case with John Minton. John Minton will start his calendar before the spring equinox some years, and here is the reason why, and it's found in the book of Enoch, and I believe this is very technical, and I'm surprised that he figured all this details out, but it's up here in this top left hand corner. There is something that happens every 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, and 8 years. There's a pattern. There's a pattern that repeats, and basically it has to do with when the full moon will be in the intercalary week. So basically, every calendar has to intercalate, or have, like the Gregorian has the leap year. The Gregorian calendar has the leap year. Well, on the Zadok calendar, we have a leap week that we have to add in a full week every so many years. And this pattern actually takes place. He finds this pattern, I believe, of the cycle that takes place, and it's every 3, 5, 6, or 8 years. It happens in multiples, and he gets that directly out of the book of Enoch. And what happens is the moon, the full moon, will fall in the week of the intercalary week, and this will basically be a full moon festival. And in this version, you will keep your day 1 within 4 days of the spring equinox always. You will never be more than 4 days either before the spring equinox or 4 days after the spring equinox. You're always going to be as close as you possibly can be with this calendar. And he gets that directly from Scripture. So that's what I'm going to read, which, yes, by the way, I just thought of another pointer, is you always will start your number 1 day of the 364 days. You'll start it on a Wednesday, which is the 4th day of the weekly cycle. The reasoning for this is, number 1, that's what they had in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Number 2 is because the sun, moon, and the stars were created on day 4 of creation week. So that helps us understand that we're always going to start the 364-day cycle of the year on day 4 of the week, Wednesday. The only question is do we have to add in an extra week of intercalary days that they're not actually on the calendar, okay? They're just additional days that don't calculate in. So you'd kind of have a 371 day, but you'll never mess up the weekly cycle this way. And so I do just want to throw in that there are some people who are keeping what they call the Zadok calendar, or what was in the Dead Sea Scrolls. However, they do not worry about the 7-day weekly cycle. Instead, what they do is they simply start day 1 on the spring equinox. When that spring equinox takes place, they start day 1 every year. And so what happens is they lose a day or 2 days, each year, that they just run it off the clock, and then they start their weekly cycle over. So the weekly cycle gets messed up. So they are following the same structure. However, they do get off of the eternal Sabbath, which is another reason why I appreciate this way of doing things. And now we're going to go ahead and read it. The moon does have significance, guys. And we're going to see why, because the moon will tell us when the solar year begins. And it is here in Enoch chapter 74, verse 13. And by the way, Enoch has different versions out there. I just suggest that people go ahead and get a Sefer if you can afford it. I think it is the best option as far as having one book with all the main books in it. So here we go. The moon brings on all the years exactly. See, there it is. The moon brings on all the years exactly, that their stations may come neither too forward nor too backward a single day. So the moon is helping us that our calendar doesn't get too far forward or too far backward. That's exactly what he is doing, John Minton is doing, is it'll go backward behind the equinox, and then you'll add a week and it'll get forward in front of the equinox, but it'll never get too far backward or too far forward. But that the years may be changed with correct precision in 364 days. So we see that Enoch is saying there's some kind of pattern here. There's some kind of change here that has to take place so that the years don't get messed up. In other words, there's an intercalation that has to take place. And that's exactly what John Minton is doing. And that's why I think this is the best calendar. The next verse. Sorry, we're still in the same verse. Verse 13. In 3 years, the days are 1,092, and you'll see that up here, top left corner, 1,092 days. In 5 years, they are 1,820, and in 8 years, 2,912 days. And then he goes on to talk about the moon. So he is, I remember when I first read through this, and I thought, I wonder why what's the point of that? I did remember it, and I just remember feeling confused. But the point is Enoch is pointing out a cycle that takes place in the heavens, and what John Minton discovered that takes place is the full moon will fall within this intercalary week. And that tells you that you need to add a week of 7 days before you begin your year, when that full moon falls in this. And my bad, guys, this whole time I'm pointing the mouse down here in the fall. I should be up here in the springtime. Okay, so the full moon up here in the springtime will fall in this intercalary week, and that will mean, and of course it'll be right at the end of the 364 days, if a full moon is going to fall into that right after you finish your year in that week, that's going to mean that that's an intercalary week. So the moon is going to bring on all the years. And this takes place in this pattern every 3, 5, 6, or 8 years. Very rare, but sometimes it'll happen every 8 years where you'll have to add in an intercalary week. I think most often it's every 5 or 6 years that pattern takes place, and you will intercalate, and this will keep you not too far backwards and not too far forwards in your year. So it never tells us in Scripture to add an intercalary week. It's the only thing that can possibly be, if you want to maintain the weekly cycle and you want to maintain the 364-day calendar year to observe your feast days, the only thing you can do to keep pace with what actually happens, which today NASA tells us that it's 365.24 something days. Well, you'll get really deep into that with John Minton. But this is basically the main two things I wanted to go over about the Zadok calendar, and just kind of explain where we are. But yeah, he does a really good job with his laser pointer. It's all written out. You have leap years every 3, 5, or 8 years, and it can be a multiple of 3, which would be every 6 years. He shows all that. He will show you all of that. And this is just the best thing that's out there. Here you see him, how when he moves that dial, it's going to change with your springtime and your fall time, so that sometimes your Feast of Trumpets can fall right on the fall equinox, the autumnal equinox, and sometimes your beginning of the year can fall right on the spring equinox. It just all depends, but you can't let it go too far backwards or too far forwards. You have to consider in that change that takes place. And yeah, so those are the two passages that I wanted to read. This is a solar calendar, guys. This is a solar calendar. And the moon does follow the sun. Believe it or not, the moon follows the sun. And one of the signs that you can witness the spring equinox, when it goes into its gate and it sets into that gate that will give you your spring equinox, well, the moon will follow right behind it, right into that same gate every year at the equinox. So you see how the sun leads the way and the moon follows. So it does become quite clear, really, when you examine what's going on in the heavens, that we should be following a solar calendar. But Jerry Morris actually goes over this. He goes over a sundial and how to make one, and he actually was offering, he's passed away now, but he was offering paperwork and a manual of how to build your own one of these sundials, which can't be too hard. I'm a carpenter, but I think it would involve at least some skill. But the reality is anybody can check where the sun is at with a sundial and figure out where you are in the year. figure out when the beginning of the year is, whereas only the people in Israel can check the barley to see if the barley is ripe. So that's one issue, is that you're relying on testimony from another source on the internet. And what if you don't have access to that? Well, you can have your own sundial, and all you have to do is point it at the North Star and observe the shadow that the sun makes on your sundial, and you can see right when the year is changing over, right when it's a new year. So he goes over that. He goes over the priestly courses and how they were keeping track of these things. I pretty much think I've gone through it all, but again, the calendar here will be coming up. July 18th is the next special day, which is mentioned in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the new wine. So I might get some grape juice. I was thinking I probably won't drink any wine this year because I've had trouble with alcohol in my past. And then month number 6, we'll see the September 5th will be the Feast of First Fruits of the new oil. Olive oil, give me oil in my lamp, we need to have the oil in our lamps, because I do believe that the oil in our lamps are Yah's feast days, and following his word and watching when he's going to be returning on a feast day. So, and then there's the Feast of Wood Offering. I'm not sure about that. I'm pretty sure that is mentioned in Torah, at least various mentions of wood, but I'm not exactly sure what that day is about. And then we'll be coming up to month 7, and we will begin month 7 with the 3rd day of remembrance, the Rosh Chodesh of the 7th month. And that will be the autumnal equinox, equal day and equal night. And then we'll have the Feast of Trumpets, which will be September the 15th. Trumpets, the high Sabbath. And, all these begin at sunrise, except for the Day of Atonement, which is a fast day, which will be September 24th. Because that begins, it says, fast is from sundown on the 9th to sundown on the 10th, which is another implication and big pointer as why would they specify this for only one Sabbath? Well, that shows that typically you would begin a Sabbath when the sun comes up. The day starts when it's daytime, when the sun comes up. But this particular one, because it's a fast, you begin fasting, when the sun goes down. You have your last meal of the 9th day, and then you go to bed and you don't eat anything. And you, or some people won't actually sleep for the Day of Atonement, but you would basically not eat again until evening on the 10th day. So you actually could have a celebratory feast for the Day of Atonement because you fasted for 24 hours from sundown to sundown. So you could eat a meal after sunset. You could break your 24-hour fast then. And then we go to, then comes Tabernacles, the 15th day of the 7th month. That reminds me of that detail I was trying to think of one of the reasons why I love this, love this calendar, is the 3 times that all males were to appear before Yah was, what were they? Well, it was the 15th day of the 1st month, which was the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it would be the 15th day of the 3rd month, which would be the Feast of Shavuot. And then, of course, the 15th day of the 7th month, which is the Holy Convocation for the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. So easy to remember the three major times in Scripture where all males were to appear in Jerusalem were all 15th days of their respective months for the three main high Sabbaths, annual Sabbaths of the year. And so Judaism does not maintain that little detail, but that, these are set. The beauty of this calendar is everything is set. But here we have Tabernacles, 15th day of the 7th month, always, right? And it's always on Wednesday, always. That remains the same every year. So that makes it, once you get it down, it is nice. It is easier. It just, we have to really change our mindset of how we look at the calendar. But you see that goes for a week of the Tabernacles. Then October 6th will close out the Feast of Tabernacles, the last great day, or the outpouring, the latter rain, whatever you want to call it. It's just called the last great day. Another high Sabbath, Holy Convocation. And then you have Hanukkah it's saying December 8th, which that's just really a Jewish tradition, but just something to take note of. And then finally December 14th, the fourth day of remembrance, the fourth Intercalary day, and that is where you have the shortest day of the year. So that's where we are on the calendar. And of course you go through month 11, and then you go through month 12, and you're going to get also Purim, which comes from the book of Esther. Purim celebration, February 26th, which is also really a Jewish tradition that really wasn't given to them from Yah, but yet it's still celebrated. So it's just something to take note of. And then there are explanations here at the end. Actually, let me just maybe I can slowly scroll through so you can pause and read all this, because I'm going to get this uploaded. So he actually adds in a bunch of detail, and this is really, it's really great, but there are those who are doing this exact same calendar. The only difference would be is that they will not start the year before the spring equinox. They feel that is the correct thing. Here you have Yehovah. He does pronounce the name Yehovah. I pronounce it Yahuwah. And I have not read all this, guys, so just letting you know that I don't necessarily agree with everything. Oh, he does have Nehemiah's wall, Nehemiah Gordon explain. So he goes with Nehemiah Gordon's explanation, which many are flocking to. Nehemiah Gordon. It's really surprising because I don't think Nehemiah Gordon even believes in Jesus Christ and Yahushua HaMashiach. He's just a Karaite Jew who follows Torah. However, he is not necessarily a believer of our Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach. So I don't really think that he's got good information. I have listened to him. He has some very good information. I just think we really need to be careful as just having him being the final Hebrew, authority. Just because he's looked through actual scrolls, he's still trusting in the Masoretic Hebrew, which is much later. He wants to trust his ancestors, and the problem is they wanted to cover up the name. They wanted to hide the name. They didn't want people to pronounce the name because that was part of their tradition, was the name was too holy to speak. So the vowel pointings are much more likely to have been guiding people away from actually uttering the name and reminding people to say Adonai. So although if you do pronounce it out, yeah, it's going to sound like Yehovah or Jehovah. However, I think there's better evidence that, I believe there's better evidence that it was pronounced Yahweh, Yahweh, Yahuwah, with the Yah at the beginning, and the Vav not being a consonant. It's a vowel, just like in Judah, Yahuda, and the Messiah's name, Yahusha. That Vav is a U. It's an U. Solomon, Shalomah. It's an U or O. It's a vowel. It's rarely are you going to have a consonant, but nonetheless, that's just a whole nother discussion. Just trying to fill the time here as I'm. Oh yes, this is a good one because this shows. Yeah, make sure I get that one on there. That shows how he intercalates. It's a repeated pattern. It keeps repeating. He finds the pattern that takes place, and it's in line with Enoch. That is that chart. And here's explanation. Oh, I can't wait till I actually read this stuff, because he did not have all this detail before. But they recently sent me this. Wow. On and on this stuff goes. I hope that somebody, I could just, I guess, email people this, but the thing is yeah, I can email it to people if you want to ask me. I can definitely forward it to people. Wow. Page 60 of 63, and just doing this for you guys, for my listeners, my followers. Come on now. There it is. There's the end. Okay, I went through it for everybody. So we'll go ahead and end the video right there. Thank you guys for watching. Hope this helps you. Shabbat Shalom for me. And just wanted to do that to remember the day of remembrance. The one other thing I was going to show, but really you can go to John Minton's page, and he will explain all this stuff. You just have to have the time to set aside if you really want to understand. And again, I'm going to be working through this book. I haven't got through it. I just haven't had time. But thank you guys. Like, share, subscribe if you so desire. Thank you so much. And we'll see you on the next one.